Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. Awesome. Yeah, we're super excited for our webinar today on the 3 key strategies to attract and retain multi-generational talent for the restaurant industry specifically. As you see here, we have our great panel of folks from Landed, from the ADP team, and then also from Another Broken Egg Cafe and Sailormen Inc. So yeah, I'll pass it over to our panelists in just a second, once we give people some time to join. And just a couple of housekeeping things at the start. Quick reminder, any questions throughout the session to do with technology, technical things, feel free to message myself and Kyan, your co-host, at any point in time through the chat function. And then the other thing is we have the Q&A enabled. So anytime throughout the session, if you have any questions, you can submit it via the Q&A button in your panel that you can see in the Zoom interface. And we'll be taking those questions and answering them live at the end of the session. Awesome. We'll give people another like 20 seconds. And then afterwards, without further ado, I'll pass it over to Vivian to get us started and get the discussion underway. And excited for all the insights the operators and our panelists will share throughout the session. Okay, yeah, Vivian, passing it over to you, and we can get started from here.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We're really excited to talk about attracting, retaining multi-generational talent in the restaurant industry. I think that this is like a super important topic right now because we're kind of in the middle of all this change in the industry. We have a new workforce. Gen Z is entering the chat. We got millennials. We have all the different generations, and all working together under one roof, doing hard work. I mean, servicing guests, making sure that the product is coming out right, keeping up with all the technology changes. So we're super lucky to have a really great panel here today of operators and partners of operators in the space. So we're going to start out with some quick introductions, and I'm going to pass it around for everyone to say hi, but I'm the founder and CEO of Landed. We help restaurants with hiring. And I'm going to go over to Chris next to introduce himself and ADP.
Hey, thanks so much, Vivian. Yes, Chris Mullen. I'm the Vice President of Workplace Insights at ADP, which basically I spanned in 2 worlds. That's where I spend my time, is in the practitioner world and the research world. So I have a doctorate, and I was a practitioner for over 15 years in HR, head of HR most recently at the University of Colorado in Boulder. And so happy to be here and to join the panel with you all today. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Chris. So my name is Jessica Presnell. I'm the Director of Human Resources for Another Broken Egg. I oversee the corporate side of Another Broken Egg, all 48 locations, which encompasses our recruitment team as well. And in addition to that, I support our franchisees.
Amazing. Excited to be here with everyone. I'm Helen Quinones, and I'm the Director of Human Resources for Sailormen Inc. We are a franchisor, so I oversee 135 Popeyes locations, 40 Taco Bell locations, all through the Florida, Georgia area. The entire employee life cycle, from their application to their hopefully retirement with us. And we service just under 5,000 employees. So really excited to be here today and get to chat with everyone. Thank you for having me.
Amazing. So operators, folks with collectively decades of experience in the industry. So we have a really packed agenda today together. So we are going to be talking about the 3 key strategies for attracting and retaining multi-generational talent. The first one is going to be about enhancing your employer branding, Second will be about optimizing communication. And third is about leveraging technology. And then we're going to close out with just some quick intros about Landed and ADP and questions. So as Mark mentioned, definitely drop questions into the Q&A. We're going to get to those at the end of the session today. Awesome. So we're going to start out with a little bit of context. So I think a lot of us are data people here. So we're going to start out with some context about the workforce today, and some pretty surprising insights in this data. So the first being the workforce and how it is spread across generations. So I think all of us know that in the past, 3 years, it's been an absolute blur, but with the past 3 years being a blur, it just so happens that during that time, we've moved into a completely multi-generational workforce in hospitality. So actually over 40% of workers are Gen Z. Over 40%. Over 35% are millennials, over 21% are Gen X, and 3.4% are boomers. So we have 4 different generations working under one roof with, at this point, over 75% of that being millennials and Gen Z. So we're talking about a different workforce. This is some really rich data. Definitely, we're going to be sharing all the materials afterwards, but very interesting to see the kind of split out and something to consider as we're thinking about how to structure your trainings, your onboardings, your talent, how you talk to your workforce. So that's the first piece, is that the distribution of employees by age has significantly skewed over to Gen Z and millennials. I think honestly, in like a blink of an eye. So for the next piece, to kind of put context, is that the restaurant industry is often people's first job. I think probably everyone on this call, if not everyone that's participating and watching this, your first job was in a restaurant. I remember for me, I was working as a barista at Caribou Coffee, making those frappuccinos, and it was my first job. I learned so much. And we find that 1 in 3 Americans actually got their first job experience in a restaurant. So that's a really big responsibility for all of us in the industry, because we're kind of taking completely green, completely, inexperienced folks, bringing them into a very fast-paced environment, and where you're servicing other guests. And we're also helping them kind of get their feet wet in what is a job? Like, what does it mean to have a job? So that's really cool, honestly. And back to Gen Z, right? Making up 49% of food service workers, and that number is only going to increase over time. So 49%, nearly 50% of your workers being Gen Z, and that number creeping up over time is definitely something that we're going to kind of dive into a little bit later in the strategies, but something to keep in mind. And employers, the third piece is that employers promoted Gen Z workers into management 1.2x faster in 2023 than 2019. So 1.2x faster, we're seeing that Gen Z workers are moving into management. And so that means, potentially like different type of management, different types of tools that are preferred in management. Everyone on this panel had a really kind of exciting prep call. So there are a lot of interesting things that we're going to talk about in Gen Z and management, and how we can really like make the most out of like just a really fresh, young, kind of vibrant like generation entering the chat. So I'm going to pass it over to Chris to talk about some more data that we have here for you.
Yeah, I want to continue the theme here, Vivian, of what's happening with Gen Z. Little context with the charts or the graphs that you see on your screen right now, but ADP has access to a large amount of data. our ADP Research Institute. You'll see at the end, I have a slide that shows all the data that we have access to. But the ADP Research Institute does a lot of different studies. And one of them that we recently did this year was the Gen Z worker. And so you'll see here on the left-hand side that Gen Z is moving into management at a fast clip. You'll see this line, it starts in 2019 and ends in 2023. That's the research timeline that we did. And you can see how fast that they're taking off, these managers, and how many direct reports that they have. And then you see on the right-hand side, you start to see how Gen Z as a share of months worked, and how, or sorry, not months worked, that's a whole other graph, but how many their promotion into management. And they are equal now. In 2022, they became equal with boomers, which I think I can annotate, right? You can start to see right here, and they continue to stay with the baby boomers. So they're getting promoted at the same clip as baby boomers. And it's really to watch this particular generation come in to the management space. And so if we flip over, if we start to look at all generations, we start on the next slide, we start to see that different generations really value different things. And I think a lot of us understand that. Doesn't matter what generation you're in, like, you know what you value, but you can also see it for maybe those that you manage, those that manage you, that we all have different things. And you can see that, let me see if I can get rid of this annotate. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. There we go. All right, they're off. That's funny. So when it comes to the different generations, you see Gen Z really looks for flexibility. They're looking for benefits, great work environment, career advancement opportunities. So they're beginning their career, but they're very different than the generations who are above them, right? In the sense that mentorship is super crucial for them. You see 40% of Gen Z said that mentorship was crucial, and because it helps build their confidence, professional skills. So, to me, I know we'll get into this a little bit more. If you have a lot of Gen Z in your company and your organization, having that mentorship and the development of their career is super important. Otherwise, they will leave, right? So if you're seeing a lot of Gen Z leave, then you might want to consider, what are we doing for their professional skills? And they really do care about their coworkers. A lot of coworkers become their friends, or their friends take the job with them. So that is one of their top motivators for their daily work. And so we see that from the Gen Z. When it comes to millennials, we talk a lot about the employer brand. They're continuing to build their career. So sometimes having that brand logo on your resume is really nice for some of the millennials. And remember, these are just generalizations. This doesn't hold true for everyone in these specific generations, but it's something that we have noticed. Work-life balance is a really big deal. Think about millennials. A lot of them are either starting families, have families. And so the ability to work, the ability to play and have a life is important. And salary comes along with that, right? In order to do things outside of, you need to have a decent salary. You need to have healthcare. And we can't forget, I don't want to just say that like millennials are all having children, because that's not totally the case. There's also elder care, right? Some millennials are caring for their aging parents. And so that becomes a concern for organizations to think about millennials and say, oh, wow, okay, how do I help support these employees? You'll see millennials have options here. 62% of millennials would turn down a job offer after an unwelcoming interview. We're going to get into branding, but this speaks directly to that. And what does your brand look like, and how do you treat your employees, your candidates, your applicants? From a boomer perspective, we start to see they want a steady schedule, right? They want health insurance as they are getting older. They want loyalty because they want the job security. And of course, the 401k. You see here, 27% of boomers lack retirement funds, with 71% reporting that they are behind in retirement savings. So we might see boomers stick with the companies longer. Plus, healthcare has gotten better, so folks are not you know, the average age of death is growing. It's getting, you know, our lives are expanding and getting longer. So healthcare is really important, and they might stay in the job longer. In fact, a lot of times you can entice boomers, if they are retiring or offboarding, you can entice them to come back maybe part-time. They like that steady schedule. They like their coworkers. So something to think about there. Let's go on to the next slide here. I think we've talked a little bit more than enough about the generations, but from a strategy perspective, strategy one is enhancing employer branding. This is near and dear to my heart. I spend a lot of time with a lot of huge companies about what is their brand, what is their calling card when it comes to their employees. One of the areas I spend so much of my time is creating remarkable employee experiences. And how do you create these moments that matter for your employees that they're going to tell their friends and family about you, right? And so let's dive into this strategy a little bit more here. I wanted to bring about some additional research that ADP-RI, the ADP Research Institute, did last year, and it was around talent brand promoters. And so you might be like, okay, Chris, like, what is a talent brand promoter? What does this really even look like in our setting? Well, every month, ADP-RI, they survey 2,500 people just for specific surveys alone to see how it changes over time. And one of the things that they started to notice from a talent branding perspective is that companies were continuing to fight over employees, over workers, right? You would have workers leave for 50 cents an hour or $1 an hour, but there were a lot of employees that would stay because of the brand or because of their coworkers, and they would promote that to their family and friends. I saw this when I was at we saw it as an opportunity when I was at CU Boulder, because I oversaw and supported the dining halls, and at CU, it's a huge campus. The dining halls are humongous. Inside one dining hall, we have 8 different stations. So think of it as like maybe a mall food court or something like that. And we noticed that obviously when you don't have enough employees, that you have to shut some of those things down. And so some of those stations. So what we started to do is like, what is our brand? Who do we know that are great workers? And so we had a very familial employee base because of their cultures and where they came from. And so we started a recruitment program for family and friends. And we started to see an increase in applications, in qualified applications, which is more important, right? So a company's reputation among the people it already employs is super critical for attracting that new talent. And so you have to be laser focused, because it can become a really great marketing and recruitment tool. And so what you see this is just one little excerpt that I pulled out of the study, which we can share a link to later after this is over. But when you have folks who are talent brand promoters, they are more likely, you see here on the left, 47% more likely to be fully engaged, to be 44% highly resilient, and strongly connected. Now, I don't think there's anyone on this webinar who's going to raise their hand and say, I don't want that. We all want that, right? We all want fully engaged employees. We want them highly resilient and strongly connected, because they're less likely to leave us and more likely to bring people in, because they're like, I love working here. This is a great place to work. You should come. And they bring people with them. And so when we talk about, that's how talent brand promoters are different. And like I said, we'll get you that research. You can really read into it. It's like 5-6 pages long. It's really interesting stuff. And we talk about how you can do it. But I want to jump in with our panelists here to really talk about what does this look like? This strategy of your brand, right? How are you all doing this in your organizations? And so I think, Helen, are we starting with you first, I think?
Yeah, absolutely.
I would love to hear from you. What are you doing on the ground, similar to the story that I talked about at your place?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, a bulk of our business is Popeyes. We have about 3,500 Popeyes team members. And what's interesting is that about our median age range is 47. So we have a much more mature population, which is interesting because Popeyes really focuses on being kind of the quirky, cheeky brand and wanting to attract the Gen Z. So when we think about what are we doing to build the brand recognition, it's really been how do we have something for everyone? Many of the things that were shared earlier in the presentation when it did the breakdown of Gen Z, Millennial, and Boomer, and I think it was Gen X as well. How do we take a look at what our time off is? How do we make sure we have healthcare for people that need it? What does it look like to be involved in the community? People oftentimes want to work somewhere where they feel that there is purpose to what they're doing. And the last thing that I would say that we really try to focus on is that how does this role working in a restaurant, how is this going to enrich their life? We talked about the first time job seeker. How do we make this a great experience or great learning so that when they go to the next job, they feel that much more confident? And as we see in our statistics, 47 as a median age range means people are really sticking with us, or they're coming to us for a second career offering. So how do we make this where they have what they need to stay in the workforce longer, as you mentioned, Chris?
Yeah. That's really wonderful. I appreciate how your demographic is a little different, I think, than the rest of the industry. So it's really interesting to see now. Follow-up question for you. Are you doing anything for that age group or that generation from a perks different from younger? I know a lot of companies aren't doing benefits across the board, but they're giving an optional card type
Yep.
of benefit package.
Absolutely. So all of our full-time team members are offered a benefits package that's no different. We do see that 26 and under really take advantage of living at home and take advantage of being on there. And when it comes to what we do to keep kind of the older generation engaged is really about making sure that from a training perspective, we're meeting them where they're at. From a communication perspective, we're meeting them where they're at. And one of our big focuses in line with what we were talking about with healthcare is how do we just make sure that they know how to use everything that's available now? You can go to the teledoctor and save a ton of money, but maybe there's some resistance to the technology behind that. Or, even in the demographic of people that work for us, sometimes they don't have access to a smartphone. So how do we make sure that there's a tablet in the restaurant that we encourage people to utilize while they're working if, they need assistance, or reaching out to our people team here to say like, hey, we can help you really learn how to use the tools that we're providing you. We don't want to say that we offer great benefits, but we're not here running alongside them to make sure they're user friendly.
Yeah, the utilization I think is really important when it comes to benefits training. Two comments that I have: the 26 and under, that's a whole other conversation. How do we get them off our payroll as parents?
Yeah.
And then two, I loved how like you talked about, giving them skills, because I think about, my kids, I think about people I worked with in the past, and a conversation I had when I was at CU. I butted heads with one of the directors because they were like, Chris, if we give them all this training, they're going to leave us. And I said, well, but that's a great calling card to have when they go to their friends or when they go to the next job. Where did you learn that specific skill? I learned it here. And that becomes your call. That becomes your brand promoter when they've left you, that they're still promoting it. That's so wonderful. Jessica, how about you? Could your area?
Yeah, absolutely. So our demographic is slightly different than Helen's. So a little background of another Brick and Egg. Like I said earlier, I oversee our 48 corporate locations, but we have over 100 in total. And our workforce looks different. So the majority of our hourly employees are under the age of 40. And so we see a high population of Gen Z and millennials within our workforce. And so, just like selling your brand to franchisees and guests is important, we found that selling our brand to candidates and team members is extremely important. And it's a sell that you have to make every single day, right? It's not a one and done thing. It's a commitment to culture and consistency in culture. And so we began to see really great success when we clearly defined what the AID way was, right? And it quickly became the biggest selling point. We're a daytime cafe, right? Our hours are great. It helps with that work-life balance, right? We open at 7, we close at 2, right? And it's helped us create, that security and stability that the older generations are looking for as well. But when we started the journey, we started by sitting down and asking ourselves, what makes us unique? Why should our team members choose us over competitors? What do we want our team members to tell their family and friends? And so to do this, we looked at, the needs and the wants and the values of our diversified workforce. And we noticed that within Gen Z and millennials, there was a heavy focus on technology and innovation and opportunities for growth and development through mentorship and training programs. They liked the work-life balance. And they were really interested in having an opportunity to create a social impact within their communities. And we saw differences in Gen X and Boomers, right? It was more about stability, security, leadership opportunities, compensation, and benefits. And so the goal ultimately became crafting a branding message through our recruitment that spoke to all of these priorities across each generation without losing the core of who we were as a brand, as Another Broken Egg. And so we decided to build a recruitment strategy that used both internal and external resources, much like Landed, that helped us showcase, our commitment to work-life balance, to career growth, to development, and all those things that, the generations that we were employing prioritized. And we did that by consistently communicating our vision, our mission, our purpose. We identified those. We made sure that we incorporated those in all facets of our recruitment process and through all of our platforms, right? We use a multitude of platforms. We use our website, social media, job boards, and we intentionally weaved all of that throughout our continued messaging. So in interviews, onboarding, training, and by doing all of that, we began to stand out as an employer of choice, and we created a really solid pipeline of candidates. We're to a point now with our recruitment that we aren't hiring out of desperation or need to fill positions. In fact, for the first time in our company's history, we're to a point of where the majority of our cafes are fully staffed, and we're really just overturning talent at this point with higher level talent. And so, I think it really boils down to just making sure that your employer message, your employer branding is truly authentic to who you want to be as an employer and who you want your team members to remember you as. And that comes really out of being consistent and really emphasizing, what makes you unique as an employer.
I think all of us want to be in that spot where you don't just need a warm body, right?
Yes.
That's a great place.
That's a nice.
Well, yeah, when it comes to hiring. And so, I'll open it up to either one of you, but like how I've been spending a lot of time with the candidate experience, the applicant experience. It's one that's near and dear to my heart because I love onboarding, but to get to onboarding, you got to have a really great candidate experience. And I have some friends, people that reach out when they're looking for roles and they say, Chris, man, we just get ghosted all the time. Like, we don't even get a denied email or letter, or I was a finalist and I did get a denied email. Like, I didn't even get a phone call. And so to me that, yeah, I know, I was shocked too, but it happens quite often. And so to me, that experience is also a part of your brand. Even though someone doesn't come in and is an employee, they still interact with your brand. And to be honest, like a lot of our companies, many of them, we have customers. And if I have a bad experience at one place trying to apply, I might not eat there again. I might not shop there again. And I'm probably going to tell my family about it. Right. And, so you're creating a brand with that experience. And so do you see any differences with either the generations or how you're hiring? I heard different modes between websites and recruitment. I think You know, I mean, back in the day, it used to be all job fairs. I mean, we don't have to do that anymore. Now, a lot of the brand is, what are you doing on social media? So is there anything unique that you're doing that you would share with the group that maybe they could replicate?
Yeah, so absolutely. I can kind of take the lead on that. Right now, actually, as an organization, we've been playing a lot with social media recruitment. We know that Gen Z prefers fast, direct, mobile-friendly interactions. We're seeing, you know, the Gen X and Boomers slowly start to leave the workforce, and the majority of our workforce is really, you know, Gen Z and millennials. And so we've kind of tailored our approach to ensure that we're really recruiting through all of those web-based or internet-based platforms, and that looks a lot like social media. It's the first time for our company that we're, you know, actively advertising openings on social media, or will be here very shortly. And the mass majority of our applicants are coming through job boards and electronically. It's very rare anymore that we get a team member to walk in the door that has a paper application. We absolutely offer that, but we don't see that often anymore. We see a pretty high preference from younger generations to communicate directly through, you know, digital communication sources. And so when we switched over, we recently did an ATS transition, and we saw that, you know, our Gen Z is wanting immediate responses. They don't want to sit around for hours and wait for a response. And so we, you know, with the help of our applicant tracking system, we've expedited that, and we're responding to candidates within minutes now. We're getting them scheduled for interviews within minutes. And because we make the process so fast-paced, and we see that Gen Z really appreciates that, we've seen a reduction in ghosting. We're trying to keep up with the
I love to hear all those things, Jessica. About and yes, like the immediate response. I think like nowadays we're so we've all as consumers become so impatient. Maybe that was because of COVID, you know. I feel like now we're like, why is our food delivery order not here in like 15 minutes? I think we've just like moved into such like a fast-paced environment where I call it like the attention economy, where like you want to have the attention of the candidates because they have a lot of choice like nowadays. And so how do you capture that attention? Well, you already did by having them apply. Now let's not waste that attention that you so like, you know, you had to like go on social media, you had to, you know, spend on boosting, you had to do all that, get your employer brand out there. Well, now that you actually capture their attention, how do you hold it very quickly and respond immediately and make sure that like the parts that you have under your control, you are doing well. So sorry, Chris, I jumped in there, but I was like, I had to say yay. Love to hear that from another broken egg.
No, and I was going to say, you know, there's a business imperative here, right? Your time to hire just decreased significantly, it sounds like.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, we're looking at between the time that somebody applies to when they get a scheduled interview to when they're hired, that time to apply timeline is really 4 days. We average 4 days. So that's crazy. I mean, I can't say that, you know, in my younger career experience, I ever got a job or was offered a job within 4 days, right, of applying. But that's where we are, right? And so from the time, you know, they click on the link, submit their application, schedule their interview, have their interview, and are offered a job, we average 4 days. And that's insane, but that's what the generation's requiring.
But then, you know, if you continue down the path of business imperative or business efficiency, now you're also talking about filling that spot. Productivity goes up, you know, at your location, and the employees who are already there aren't being overwhelmed or burdened with a ton more work because now you're at full capacity. I absolutely love it. I mean, Vivian, I could talk about this for days, but I know we've got 2 other sections to get to. So should we go over to strategy number 2?
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. So we're going to we kind of like touch on some of these pieces, but we're going to talk about optimizing communication. And so for this one, I mean, how there's so many different pieces of communication. It's communication from the beginning of like the first time they ever hear of another Broken Egg Cafe or Sailormen, Popeyes, all the way through to their interview process, their offer process, their onboarding process, their scheduling and training and like and beyond. And even honestly, even like offboarding process. I know that a lot of in the restaurant industry, you get a lot of like boomerangs who come back. So kind of thinking about like the communication all the way through. I think it'd be great, maybe Jessica, for you to start and kind of go into like some of these different questions that we have. So, do you notice any differences in how workers of different generations approach the interview and job finding process? Are there any similarities? And then I know that we touched on some of those pieces. So to add on with the second point, how do workers of different age ranges communicate once they begin the job? So with the rising number of Gen Z managers, how do you ensure that employees are communicating smoothly despite generational differences? I remember during our prep call, you mentioned the use of technology and how, something as simple as like calling out for a day. Certain generations like to call, like pick up the phone, dial and call. And others are like, I would never pick up the phone and call. I like to just text. And then, when you have a Gen Z manager and maybe like a different generation worker, sometimes that clashes and, you have to kind of work through that. So there was a time that we touched on there, but maybe Jessica, you can open it up with what you've seen with ABEC.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny because that particular policy is we're still working on that. But what Vivian is saying is we recently found that, with our call out policy, right, we ask our team members to call out within before at least 2 hours before their shift, right, in order for it to be an excused call out. And at the time, our policy was currently written to require an actual phone call, right? But we were seeing that a lot of our younger team members were just refusing. And instead of calling out, they just did no call, no shows because they were just so, unadapted to actually having to pick up the phone and give a call to their manager. And so we are actually in the process of rewriting that policy to allow for instant message or text message communication to managers to work as a call out to, better support Gen Z and millennials. We see it a lot more heavily within Gen Z than we do millennials, but I think it goes to the fact that Gen Z highly prefers digital communication. When we look at millennials, it's blended with a heavy preference towards digital. And then with our Gen X, we see a blended approach, but a heavier preference towards in-person communication. And so we always encourage within our cafes a blended approach and in using multiple channels. So we use Teams, we use text messages, we use emails, we use in-person meetings or huddles. But we also set expectations. And so our team members know when to use each channel appropriately, right? I think it's important to set boundaries. And so messaging apps, we use that for quick updates, something real quick. And we use email for more formal documentation, formal communication. And in-person meetings or in-person huddles are to help, create and build work culture for deep discussions, brainstorming meetings. And so, it's always been our approach, and it will continue to be our approach until it's no longer needed, to use blended channels. That's what we see the most success with. But also to do mentorships. We like to do intergenerational, cross-generational mentorships. And so it's not abnormal for us to, partner a 50-year-old server with a 20-year-old server. And there's strengths and weaknesses of both of those, and they help each other and they support each other, and they come out stronger in the end.
Love that. Yes, I think that's really cool that you're doing that like intergenerational like mentorship, because they're both servers, they're in the same role, but they kind of come with like a whole wealth of like different backgrounds and experiences. And another Broken Egg Cafe is a franchisor, has franchisees, and so you guys are kind of setting the tone for like communication and all of that. And actually, Helen, I know you are sitting kind of on the other side of that. You are a franchisee of Popeyes, and but you've also been on the franchisor side with your wealth of experience at Taco Bell and all these different places. So when you think about communication, of course, and I'm sure we have a lot of like folks who are franchisees listening in, how do you think about balancing like, what you want to do, putting your own flavor on communication and your own Sailormen, Sailormen has a super fun brand. In addition to Popeyes having a fun brand, how do you marry that being a franchisee and, working with a franchisor that might be putting in place some like just best practices too?
Yeah, absolutely. Before I answer your question, I just want to say, Jessica, that is amazing to lay out the expectations of each avenue of communication so clearly. That's the first time I've heard it articulated in that way. And I'm like taking notes because I will definitely be utilizing that exact phrase moving forward. But,
Helen, I agree with you. I've done it in the past, but Jessica's the first person I've heard say it.
absolutely.
It's the first thing I do when we bring a new person on teams is to figure out when text messages should be used. Are they more personal? Are they, just for chit chat? Right. I think having, just like you would do a feedback expectation, to do communication expectations, because generations are different. But we do need to come up with some sort of boundaries of like what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely. And along those lines, when we think about what works for us, Sailormen being the franchisor and Popeyes, sorry, the opposite, Popeyes being the franchisor and Sailormen being the franchise. For Popeyes, we're pretty fortunate that as a brand, they operate in the space of simplicity. They really focus on short message bites, ensuring that it's something that can be adapted in the restaurant space. The franchisor is super clear about how labor intensive the role can be, and also not just the labor intensive aspect of the role, but they're aware of who's working for them, right? Like who are in these restaurants. And so they do a lot to support us in terms of the multi-generational communication that has to happen in some capacities, by ensuring that when there's a drop for a nationwide promotion, it's like a 2, maybe 5-minute video to update in what they call Popeyes Academy, where you're always going to see the latest. You're going to get the franchisor training. And then on the Sailormen side, we need to think about, all right, did we get everybody logged in? Was it in the language that they needed? And while the brand may have given us some of this content that goes through a learning module system, maybe there's like really cool signage that comes with a new promotion that's going to go in the back, or if they're wanting to standardize a way of working. But then we have kind of all of the other HR specific things that are coming from the franchisor, or the engagement things that we're doing to really, build as a brand. I'm really proud of the fact that we as a franchise are one of the biggest participants in Popeyes Foundation. We raise, we're sometimes the first, sometimes the second largest with getting everyone on board to get customers to donate. And how do we do things like that? And a lot of it has to do with those huddles, making sure that the communication is occurring, that it's clear. So using the channels that Jessica outlined. But one thing that we are super proud of is that we launched the Anchor. So this is a great play on Sailormen, and it is an intranet. And whenever the leadership team comes to work for the day, every single access point that they are going to need launches from the Anchor. So this is where we're putting out there kind of what has to happen, whether it's from the brand, whether it's from Sailormen, and the leadership team can then cascade that message down. And the best part of it is that it's loaded with photos and everyone wants to look at themselves, right? So the teams that are participating more and more, they're getting these shout outs that the general manager can say like, oh my gosh, guys, come look. And they can all huddle around like a 24-inch desk to see kind of what they participated in. So, I think to summarize here, I would say that we need to have this blended approach as well that Jessica mentioned. And for us, it's also not straying to do something so different from the brand to where the team member is confused. Like, okay, but I thought I did that because I logged into the computer and I did a training. And so it's like, how do we explain the difference between Popeye's Academy and the Anchor?
Well, I mean, to me, it sounds like you're both talking about this, and I would be remiss if I didn't bring it up, but it sounds like your managers and leaders are a big part of this. How do you get that? How do you get them on board, whether it's with the communication, with how they interact when they're hiring, the last two strategies, and the next strategy we'll talk about, which is technology, like, and we didn't even talk about this in our prep meeting, but like, how do you bring them on board and along? Because if they're a bad manager, people are going to leave.
Yeah, absolutely. Jessica, if you don't mind, I would love to run with this for just a second. I'm super proud of us as an organization because we get people together in one place. And today, there are always restraints on budget, on travel. And, in a post-COVID era, your CFO is going to say, you don't have to bring people together. You can get on Teams. That's why we pay for these licenses for everyone. And there's just something remarkable about getting everybody to be all in one room and share a message. So every 6 weeks, we have a district manager meeting and we get all of our regional managers together, all of our district managers together, and we kind of deliver the latest and greatest information. It is not a one-way conversation. We take from them, what can we improve on? Where can we help you? And then the information that is meant to be dispersed. After that, each regional manager has the expectation that their district manager has an in-person meeting with all of their general managers to disseminate the information. And that's something that I'm super proud of, because while it may sound like an old school way of getting the message out there, for so many people, this is the first time in their careers, or the first time in a long time in their careers, that they get to travel, that they get to have an in-person conference style messaging to them, because in so many places, that type of travel is often cut from the budget. And it's something that we've really focused on securing, because not only do we know that the message was delivered and have the opportunity to get a receipt, but even though it's not very, HR appropriate, we can hug, we can high five, we can be breaking bread in one place. And that's something that feels really special for us.
Well, look, I think a lot of our organizations need to bring the human back to work, right? And I think, that's what's working for your culture. I love it. Jessica, how about you?
Yeah, that's great. So I don't know what the geographic spread out of Helen's organization looks like, but we're multi-state, right? And so most of our we operate all of our corporate cafes in 6 different states. So the task becomes, how do you bring 48 cafes spread across 6 different states together to one unified culture? And culture is how you get buy-in, right? If your team member believes in your brand and your culture, they're going to uphold those values and push forward with that mission, vision, and purpose every day. And so we find and make space for team building like that. Biannually, every 2 years, we have a summit in which all of our GMs are invited to. On off years, we've instituted a new platform called ABA Live Roadshow, where either GMs are coming to us or we're going to them, right? And we continue to weave in these, the core of who we are, and we create a brand that managers are proud of and want to be a part of. And when you have managers like that, they're going to set the tone for their hourly team members.
Love to hear.
Absolutely. I had the opportunity to go join one of our clients for their big GM retreat. And it was so great because they did cool things like they had a cook-off where they actually brought cooks from the individual restaurants. They kind of did like regional competitions to kind of build up the excitement. And then they actually had like a monetary prize for a cook who made the best burger on stage. And so it was super fun. I think it's really great because bringing that human element, of course, like we need to be very good at, and we're going to talk about technology in a moment. Technology kind of keeps us tied and glued together in the day in, day out of the busy restaurant. But then it sounds like both of you are taking the opportunity to like step back too. It's like, hey guys, taking every single GM out of a restaurant for like a couple days feels sometimes very scary. But if you have a great team and you bring them away for, those 48, those 72 hours, get everyone to build connections. Back those, all those slides back, we talked about how people are going to be more loyal to the brand when they feel a connection with the people they work with. And
Absolutely.
I think that's like the exciting thing that you guys have both invested in. It's a lot of time, it's a lot of bandwidth, it's money, but those are the things that are the intangibles that pay off in the long term. Because, I know at Landed, we do this every year as well. And it's really just fun to get everyone together. So love that. And definitely something I think all the audience can kind of take away and kind of think about. Maybe if you don't do such a grand scale thing, maybe think about it from like a regional perspective. Just, baby steps to start getting that human element in. And I'd say both Jessica and Helen would agree that it's totally okay to pull your GMs out of operations for a couple days. Nothing will burn down.
It's a great opportunity, right, for others, for their career development to step up while the managers are away, and it instills trust in those other employees. I mean, it's a win-win all the way around if you can do it. Yeah.
Yes. Amazing. So we're going to go into the final strategy here, and we're going to talk about how to best leverage technology in attracting and retaining multi-generational talent. So when it comes to leveraging technology, technology is like the name of the game nowadays. And honestly, restaurants are probably the most high tech, four walls that exist out there. You got drive-throughs, you got point of sale systems, you might even have a ghost kitchen going in the back, you have third-party delivery. Meanwhile, you have people coming into the front of house, you have you have loyalty programs, all the different pieces, because when it comes to like eating, we eat every day. Like, so when we talk about like that experience, it's not like you're buying something, you're buying a car once every many years. You are going into a restaurant every single day, or maybe not every day, but you're going into a restaurant probably at least once a week. And so, having that technology keep up with that kind of guest traffic is something that honestly is like mind-boggling to me. So for Another Broken Egg Cafe and Sailormen's, you are using a bunch of different technology. I've already heard many different things that you're doing. So maybe, Helen, if you want to kind of jump into some of those tools that you've leveraged, or some of and the second piece, in addition to tools, I think, tools are amazing, but then how do you handle the training and the adoption of the new tools to ensure they are successful? Because throwing a tool, having it not be picked up, I think is like the nightmare of every single talent team. And then chasing for the adoption. So those two pieces maybe can kick us off there.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that in the previous slide, there was a really fun picture of our team members holding balloons, because that's actually our training team celebrating that another store became certified trained. And our trainers have been such a key part of the organization for us, because they are out there every day, not just working with the managers that are in training, but also following up with the teams on every initiative that gets launched. Vivian, when you talked about the POS, the drive-through, when you started discussing, to-go orders, these are all things that are hitting the team really hard. And not only do we have to find ways to get the information trained, but we have to keep it alive, and we have to keep them energized to know that this is for a short window, and then something new is going to come along and maybe replace this or work with that. So having this workforce of above restaurant leaders that can get out there to help ensure the adoption of the tools, whether it's through an LMS system, a learning module system. Maybe we are also utilizing our anchor, which we talked about, like an intranet through a tablet, a desktop, phone access for above restaurant leaders. So those are different ways that we disseminate the information. And in terms of tools that help make life easier, I know Jessica spent a good time talking about how applicant tracking systems make sure that we stay fully staffed, and that the process for candidates to, go right to interview, that, anything we can do in the applicant tracking systems to avoid overworking a general manager that is trying to run a restaurant. Everything just has to be really kind of 2 clicks and go. We have a mantra that's like kill the clicks, because we don't want to have any additional steps that a general manager would need to do to get something done. So, simplified applicant tracking systems, ensuring that any portals that a team member needs to get through, whether that's benefits portal, whether that is payroll portal, whether it's the brand information that comes through, how are these easily accessible, and that the time frame required to be in there is very short. Attention spans are short, and so if we can teach something in 2-minute blurbs, that's often the best way to get a result from our team.
Amazing. Yes, I love that. Kill the clicks. That's going to be a takeaway. That's going to be a mantra that we're going to take away from today's call, certainly. And what about you, Jessica, and Another Broken Egg?
Yeah, so I mean, Another Broken Egg's in its growth cycle right now, right? We're opening anywhere between 3 to 5 cafes from a corporate standpoint, far more from when we include franchisees on a year-by-year basis. And so leveraging technology is essential to our success. I mean, we maintain a workforce of almost 1,500 employees from a corporate perspective, right? And I have a team of 5, including myself. And so I've always kind of viewed it from, let's leverage technology to the best of our ability and reduce headcount as much as possible, right? While still meeting the needs of our workforce. And so our focus has always been to find tools that, offer, mobile-friendly technology that can move our workforce forward. And one of the examples of this that we utilize is a platform called AwardCo. It's a reward and recognition program. And we know that, Gen Z, millennials love tech, and our Gen X and our boomers like recognition and reward within the workforce. And so we kind of put those 2 things together, right? And it's an online mobile-friendly software in which we can recognize our team at any time, anywhere, for a multitude of different awards. We have Employee of the Month, Manager of the Quarter, Living Our Values Awards, right? And it's all monetarily based. And so every time they get recognized for a reward, every time they get recognized, they get a monetary incentive, right, that they can spend in a multitude of ways. And we've used this and we revitalize it to, like what Helen said, is like, how do you keep things going, right? And so we weave it into different areas of the operation, and we run, monthly ops contests. For September, we were running a group raise, like how many volunteer or, volunteer fundraisers can we get in our cafe? Whichever cafe, gets the most or has the most or books the most volunteer events, they get a certain amount of points. Or this year this month it's all about seasonal selections, right? And whichever cafe, highest percentage of sales is seasonal selections, they get a monetary incentive, the entire cafe. And so it's making sure that the HR initiatives support the operations goals, right? It's, HR is a supportive function or a supportive department, and our goal is to make operations as successful as possible. But as far as training and adoption of new tools, we constantly we use pilots. And so when we approach the start of a new initiative or a new training or a new tool, we find our early adopters. Who are our territory managers? Who are our GMs that are going to be in support of this initiative from the get-go? Who are our game changers and the ones that are going to talk positively about it? We find those. We typically pilot the program with those GMs. They're going to talk to their fellow GMs, their fellow territory managers. They get, the buzz going and the excitement going, so that when we exit the pilot phase and we roll it out from a company-wide perspective, everybody's super excited about it, right? The majority of the talk is excited, and they're ready to see results, and they're happy to execute it within their cafes. And when we go through that process, that's when we see the best use and the best utilization of new resources.
Yeah, I think that's really great. Like thinking about, who are the cheerleaders, who are the influencers in the organization that are going to help be your feet on the ground, right? Your feet on the ground to help you with the training and the sentiment, because a lot of it is about like attitude, right? What's the attitude around change? And I think, the attitude around change at Another Broken Egg, because you're in this growth phase, is that there will just be change. So, because we're growing very quickly. So, and Helen, you mentioned that earlier. You said, you kind of have to prime people for that. And that kind of goes into the training. Like from day one, people know that, this is a company that has a really bright future ahead. What comes alongside that is that it's dynamic, it's adapting to what the industry, what consumers, what the economy throws at you, and you have to be able to adapt very quickly. This has been such a rich discussion. I wish we were not we are technically at time, but we're going to get some questions in. So this is amazing. Something really quickly we're going to just touch on just for literally like a minute. So obviously in the vein of technology, I spend all my days, I wish I could spend all my days talking to customers, folks in the industry, people like Helen and Jessica. And I do spend a lot of that time because, when it comes to hiring at Landed, what we ultimately do is we think about using technology to source candidates, to screen the candidates, customize the screening, because there is no one size fits all when it comes to hiring. There's certainly not a one size fits all when it comes to culture. So really customizing that screening. And I know that during onboarding, Jessica and our team, we spend a lot of time really trying to distill what is that culture that is that Another Broken Egg Cafe culture. Because we want to make sure it's cohesive across the board. And then we schedule interviews based on availabilities of managers. And the way that we think about it is that we're there to support the managers. I think both everyone here, we talked about the importance of the manager. They are the person who is basically making come to life your entire brand. So supporting them in helping them with recruiting, because, operators are not full-time recruiters. They're also, they're doing a lot of full-time jobs, and that is one thing that we aim to take off the plate of managers. So, we integrate with different systems like ADP. And so really exciting to work with super innovative brands that care a lot about the candidate experience, care about that immediate response, driving speed, driving quality of hiring. I'll turn it over to Chris to talk about ADP for a bit here, and then we're going to go to questions.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head. The one reason I work at ADP is because as a practitioner, the one thing I always wanted to do when I supported the organization or employees was how do I create margin in their day so they could do their job? And one of the biggest ways to do that is technology. So, I mean, the first thing that I did was we up-leveled our technology when it came to payroll and accruals and things like that, and our HCM. And so, if you're in the market, ADP can handle all of, your technology needs, from payroll to, your human capital management. But I put this slide on here because I said I would talk about the amount of data that ADP has is bar none. And you see, we on the bottom right, we have 42 plus million workers paid across 140 countries. We pay 1 in 6 US workers. There's no other companies that have that type of data. And so, I mean, you see 80% of the Fortune's 500 are our clients. So really, we're here to kind of help you create more for your businesses, for your companies, so that you can give your employees a better experience and they can give your customers a better experience. So I'll leave it at that. At the end, my colleague, Kimberly, her picture will come up and you can contact her, but that I think we can get it now. So, oh, there we go. There's the tube. And while it's up, I'll start to look at the questions. And one of, Mark, I do have a question that I see. If you don't have any at the moment.
Yeah, please. I have a few, and then we can start with yours first, Chris.
Great.
Yeah.
Mine's really for Helen and Jessica, right? When you 3 strategies, you might not start with any of them, but where would you? There's somebody on this webinar and they're like, okay, I heard the 3 strategies. I'm in. Brand promotion, communication. Helen, would you start and just tell us, what would you do? What would you suggest?
Absolutely. I'm actually new to Sailormen, so I have been here for 5.5 months, and it has felt much longer. And so we've had to have kind of a multi-prong approach in order to get through this quickly. And the first thing was really identifying what systems do we have, so that when we build this culture that we're going to get people to want to be a part of us, are they going to be turned off by those original processes? And I think you did a really good job earlier today when you talked about being ghosted or not getting a response, or, is it a warm experience when people come in? So we can focus on those for sure, but if we don't have it set up that we can accept the volume and make it a great experience, then we wind up killing the brand before we've started. So for me, it's been the approach of, starting and looking at our systems and understanding our end goal is a great experience for the candidate. It's a great experience for the team member that's going to work here and make this a career. So how do we get them started with us? And then once they're here, how do we stay a captivating brand that has something for everyone and what they're looking for? So, those have been kind of the top priorities for me, is identifying the systems and identifying who we are as a brand, and what are we offering to make sure that there's something for everyone.
Sounds like you're being super intentional. That's what I'm hearing.
Thank you.
Really? Yeah. Jessica, how about you?
Yeah, so I've been with Another Brook and Egg for almost 4 years. When I originally came on with the brand, we completely outsourced our recruiting, and it was a little bit of a mess. And while I'd like to say, we hit the nail on the head in our first attempt at recruiting, it was amazing and everything went great. That was not the case. I think my recruitment manager might be in on this conversation today, but she can attest to the fact that there was a lot of trial and error in the beginning of when we internalized recruitment. So I think at the end of the day, you really just have to know what your end goal is. Like Helen said very well, you have to know what the end goal is. And you create a plan to get there. And you can't be afraid of failure or change. I think overall in my 4 years here, we've changed our recruitment strategy 3 different times. So that means we went back to the drawing board 3 different times to figure out what was going to work best for Another Broken Egg. And here I am going on year 4, and we feel like, we're as close as we've ever been, and we're satisfied with the results that we're seeing. And so it's a commitment. It's not fearing change, and just it's okay to start over. But really, you just got to keep the vision and the goal in your head, and figure out what the roadmap to that looks like.
Yeah, and I would suggest is, figure out what are your measurables, right? What do you create a scorecard? What do you want to measure, like the time to hire? And there's those things. And then the second thing, my second point would be is, listen to your employees. What's the voice of your employee, right? One of the things I suggest when I consult with large companies is, have you ever done a stay interview? Like, why the heck are you still here? Like, let's just call it what it is, right? And because you can get a lot from that. If you were to ask your employees or certain employees, hey, tell me, what was when you did think about leaving, what was the reason? Now, as you start to compile those reasons, those reasons now become a list of things to work on, right? And then when you also ask them, why do you stay? Why are you still here? That becomes your top 10 list for recruitment. That becomes becomes marketing. So that's kind of some of the things I recommend when talking about like where to start. So I'll leave it there. Vivian, anything to add?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think you guys covered it. I know that like in terms of like the hiring piece, right? Like there's just so many different ways that you can kind of slice and dice it. And when we think about like again, it comes down to each brand, and you're at different phases of like the journey. Like you don't have to adopt all these things like tomorrow. Like come up with a realistic plan that matches to your business. Maybe part of it is like you need to hire somebody on your team to help you manage it. I've heard so many stories of like 3-person talent acquisition teams for hundreds of locations, or like 2-person. So I think just like kind of taking it like step by step and like knowing the end goal and then working backwards with like some, aggressive timeline, but a realistic timeline is, certainly the way to go.
Awesome. Thank you all. I'll stick to kind of the top 2 questions we got from the crowd here. So first we'll start with, this is for the whole group. What trends do you all see kind of emerging for the industry overall that's going to impact the dynamics when it comes to like talent acquisition and also workforce management in general?
I would say as an operator, the trend that we see is something we talked a lot about here is speed and ease, right? So like, can I do everything right from my phone? And do I have to talk to somebody before the interview? As a millennial, I'm like half and half here. Like, all right, let's like talk and confirm or something. And so I think that that's a trend that we're seeing. And the other is like how AI is supporting the process as well. So, at what steps do you get an AI connector to really help you? And, I think we could probably talk forever about the difficulty as well of recruitment with the use of AI. But I think that's the trend that we're going to be seeing is like candidates seeking jobs are trying to make themselves as attractive as possible. And then when you are an operator that's kind of going through and looking for the best talent, you have AI to help you with the efficiencies of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Jessica, Chris, Vivian?
Yeah. I can build on that a little bit. So I'll take a slightly different approach. I mean, one of the trends that we're seeing right now, especially within Gen Z and millennials, is their interest in getting into a leadership position quickly. And so historically, we, with our Gen X boomers, we could take, 3, 4, 5 years to take them from an hourly position and move them into a management position. But nowadays we have Gen Zers that are wanting to be in a leadership position within 1 year. And if they're not, they're getting restless and they're looking for their next opportunity, whether that's a move to a different organization or not. And so how do we combat that? How do we provide the support, while making good decisions internally as an organization that's going to continue our success, but also to keep the workforce engaged? And so right now we're working on an internal leadership program that builds a pathway for, which crazy enough as it sounds, an hourly team member to get into a GM role within 18 months. And so that sounds super fast for some of us, but at the same time, if you want to retain your hard workers, the team members that, you know, are really going to make your organization successful, we have to give them a path to leadership.
That's awesome. I think everyone wants the blueprint of that. Going from hourly to GM in 18 months. That's amazing. And that does kind of match up with what we were seeing with like the speed of promotions for Gen Z. I think that like I'll kind of touch on the AI piece just because that's, you know, we at Landed live and breathe AI like all day, every day. You know, I think with the AI piece, you know, the power of generative AI is very it's amazing because it can drive personalization plus democratization of like opportunity ultimately. And I think that that's like where the industry is going, where if you work in hospitality, for 1 in 3 Americans, it is your first job. So you're not really looking at somebody's resume to determine if they're like a good fit. You're actually looking at this holistic person that ultimately you're going to be able to train and teach them all the skills that they need to know. And then on the flip side, you're also like, you know, you're fighting for the best talent. So driving a ton of personalization, I think we already are seeing it in other industries, right? In retail, in, you know, in social media, like we are getting targeted offers. We're about to head into holiday season. It's sometimes creepy how you talk about one thing and you start seeing it on your social media feed, but you can kind of see other industries and they've invested in some of these areas because it directly impacts, you know, their bottom line, their revenue, if they're able to personalize well. Well, the restaurant industry has done a ton of personalization from the guest experience perspective. We are looking at these insane loyalty programs that can like literally look at, you know, differentiate between when the parent buys ice cream for the kid, but knowing that the kid is driving the buying decision. So we're moving into this like very insane data world and being able to take that structured data and actually personalize and take that guest experience that our industry has already invested a lot into. Now we're going to take that into the worker experience, the candidate experience, and kind of match up like the level of speed, the level of ease, the level of personalization to ensure that we are standing out not just to the guest as a place to come eat and, you know, have a great time, but also a place to come work and have a great time with candidates. So I think we're going to be moving in that direction of like hyper personalization. We see it in what we're doing already with guests and in other industries. Now we're going to bring it to that human element because the talent wars are becoming just a lot more pronounced with the entry of different types of jobs like gig work and remote work and the like. So that's something that's kind of on my mind, and kind of leveraging AI to drive that personalization is another trend.
Yeah, we did not even talk about that, but that would have been my answer. Personalization from the candidate experience. I'm doing a lot of writing about it right now from that journey perspective. My reason for talking about it is very much so that when they become employees or they become brand ambassadors or promoters for you, that they feel like a sense of belonging, they feel seen and heard. And that's why I talked about what's the voice of the employee. Or even if you're going to survey, I would survey your candidates. What's the voice of the voice of the candidate about your process? And so personalizing that, people don't want to be ghosted anymore. They want to know right away or soon. And they just, you got to treat them with kindness. I talked about it on LinkedIn today. I posted about being kind. If you can be anything, just be kind. And people want that from the brands that they interact with.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for that. I know we're a little bit over time, but I want to make sure I ask this last question for the folks that are still on, and then for everybody who will watch this in recording. So where should people go to kind of stay in touch with what we discussed today, and then also continue the conversation with new learnings? You guys have any recommendations on places you go to for similar types of discussion, content, learning on similar topics when it comes to trends and insights for the industry?
I can start. Go ahead, Jessica.
No, it's okay, Chris. Go ahead. Yep. Can you hear me? Am I frozen?
Yeah, we can hear you. Jessica, maybe you can start. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. for a second on my perspective. I mean, I'm actively involved in LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn and just being keeping up with panel discussions that are very much like this. There are a lot of different methods of training and webinars and informational sessions that you can find on LinkedIn that helps you keep up to date. I would say that's a lot, but also professional organizations. So, you know, anything like the National Restaurant Association or SHRM, which is the Society of Human Resources. Being, you know, actively participating in different associations like that give you opportunities to continue to learn and grow your skill set within, you know, subsections such as recruitment. Yeah, and I would say those are the channels that I use the most often.
Awesome, thank you. Helen, do you want to go next?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say mine are very similar. The SHRM is my go-to after LinkedIn as well, because I think it just really keeps me up to date with what's happening. And then kind of locally, so for me, I belong to like a women's networking group, which is great because then I'm getting kind of really a lot of great resources being brought up to the group where people are saying like, hey, check this out, check that out. So I think those local kind of networking opportunities are really great. And lastly, I would say my mentor. Mentorship is so necessary, and just having not just a relationship with a direct mentor, but also your network, right? Like your network of people and keeping the conversations alive of like, hey, what's going on? Like, what are you involved in? People will really help kind of lead you far beyond what your own reach is, as long as you're asking and having those conversations.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Chris, Vivian, you guys want to wrap it up for us?
Yeah, I'll let Vivian have the last word. So for me, if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I post every day on LinkedIn. I post about productivity, professional development, leadership, since my PhD's in leadership studies. And where I get my info, I go to the academic world. I go to not just the academic research, but what's also the sentiment research, the market research. And I try and combine to then what should we be asking ourselves as practitioners. So if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll see kind of what I'm
Awesome, thank you so much. I think Vivian might have dropped off for a second, maybe some technology issues. So we'll get her answer offline, and then we'll make sure to send that out in the recording afterwards altogether. But this wraps it up. We're a little bit over time. Thank you all so much for staying on, and thank you all again to our panelists for making time for this really great discussion. The recording will be made available on demand on the Landed website. And yeah, thank you all so much for your time, and have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thanks.
Thank
Have a
you,
good day.
guys.
Thanks, everyone.
So sorry, I had a little technical difficulty where I think it kicked me out for a second there. But I'll just definitely find me also on LinkedIn, and also for Landed, you know, we're always posting on our LinkedIn. We have we publish white papers, we host webinars like these, and we have a newsletter where we kind of keep everyone updated on different industry trends and data points and things like that. But definitely find me on LinkedIn. I would love to hear from you and to stay in touch. I love meeting folks from the industry and just like chatting with everybody just to hear everyone's different perspectives. So thank you all for the time today. This was wonderful. This is an absolutely enriching session. I think we got into so many different topics, and honestly, we could talk for hours and hours. But this is just the tip of the iceberg, and thank you all for the time.
Perfect. Yeah, glad we got your word in at the end. Thank you all so much. And this time for real, have a great rest of your afternoon. Yeah.